right, today we're reviewing Garden of the Sea from developer Neat Corporation, who you might know from Budget Cuts, that series, published by Nico Software, at a price point of $24.99, but I will say the review copy was provided by the publisher, so thank you very much. Taking the stand, we have Garden of the Sea. And a little preamble here. Relaxing games have been a growing contingency of video game libraries ever since the surprise success of Animal Crossing on the GameCube. While nearly all of us enjoy headshotting zombies, climbing mountains, and racing supercars, every once in a while it's nice to find a game that tunes down the thrills, erases the stress, and entices us to enjoy, explore, and simply be. Unfortunately, games that offer this low-stakes approach to games also usually lower the stakes in terms of production, presenting a set of mechanics and game design that provides new avenues of frustration. Our defendant today, Garden of the Sea, is on the stand to see how it stacks up in this genre, with 3 charges facing it. The first count is one charge of keeping it casual. So on this charge, Garden of the Sea begins with a minimalist tone. You start on an island with simple picture instructions that guide you through the task of picking up seeds, tilling the land, and planting and watering crops. You then pick the crops, give them to a small island creature, and he's suddenly built a bridge from which you can further explore the island. And at this moment, you've completed one instance of the primary gameplay loop within Garden of the Sea. And I loved it. Many simple games in this vein require slogging through slow-crawling text, mashing buttons until the overwrought instructions are complete. But here there is no text, only pictures, and the pictures are almost always enough to tell you what you need to know. On top of the contextual clues, the game makes it easy to manage an inventory attached to your hand, and the method of combining ingredients to craft is as painless as dropping them into a ball and pushing a button. It feels easy, it feels good, and it feels right. Combining this with the movement mechanisms, automatically repopulating tools, and a world that seems to want to work with you to get jobs done, the game quickly becomes a place where you can relax and enjoy and explore the environment at your own pace. And for that reason, I find Garden of the Sea, on the count of keeping it casual, guilty. Adam, you got any questions for me?
So, there's casual, like Cave Digger 2, and then there's fun casual. Where would you place this in terms of the casual games? That some are puzzle games, some are just more experiences than necessarily playing a game. Where would you put it?
You're certainly playing a game. There's things to do. There's objectives to complete. So I don't want to say that you're just dropping in and looking around. It's not like Mind Labyrinth VR where like really the goal is to just kind of walk around this space and you're done. But it's not like Cave Digger 2 where there's like these strict set of objectives in front of you that you need to accomplish. Like you go into the level, do these things, and then you're done. This is kind of open-ended. You know there's tasks at hand, and you might get sidetracked and find some new task to accomplish, and there's nothing making you do one thing before you do another. I guess you'd call it fun casual. I had fun playing it. I should just kind of further explain the conceit of the game a little bit, where you grow crops, you craft items, you put those together to make new crops to get new items, and then you're feeding those to animals, or you're making, solving puzzles on islands to get more crops to craft and customize your environment.
Is it like Harvest Moon almost?
I've never played Harvest Moon, but I get some Harvest Moon vibes. I get some Animal Crossing vibes, and we'll kind of dive into that here a little bit later.
Cool. Continue.
All right. Well, on the charge of bottoming out, there is a lot to do and tinker with, but usually the depth of the activity has been revealed upon the first attempt. Like I mentioned, get some ingredients, put them together. Bam, you have a bridge. Get some ingredients, put it together. Bam, the cow on your island is happy. You can boat, you can fish, you can craft, you can customize, and you can even breed your island creatures. But once you've done each of these one time, the next step in the process is kind of similar. It could be a little bit repetitive. There's not much depth there. But it's just doing the same things with a little bit more. However, the individual elements are enjoyable. There just feels like little reason to keep returning to the activities unless it's specific for a specific resource you're looking for. However, the execution of these activities, these different mini games, they're enjoyable when you do revisit them, so you're never frustrated that, oh, I have to fish for this item. Oh, I have to ride the boat to do this. Oh, I have to grow this crop. You're kind of welcome to the idea of you having to jump back in and enjoy these things. But I will say that across all the things that you can do on the islands, there's not much depth to it. It gets kind of shallow. Crafting is what crafting is from the beginning. Growing crops is what growing crops is from the beginning. And feeding your animals is what feeding your animals is from the beginning. So, on the count of bottoming out, I find Garden of the Sea guilty.
So you mentioned that normally you don't like crafting, but you in some private text you were like, this is the first type of crafting that I don't hate. Why is that? And do you think that would be a universal statement for people who wouldn't like crafting in the majority of games?
I usually hate crafting because it's always like, hey, find these 5 items and 4 of them are easy to find, and then there's one that's really hard to find or really annoying to get. This does a little bit of that where it's like, oh, you got to do all these things and you have this weird flower you got to throw in there. However, it's really easy to grab that rare flower item from some other island, bring it to your home island, and just plant that crop, and bam, you got 10 of them right there. Waiting for the flowers to grow is like 30 seconds. I'm not waiting for a full day-night cycle or anything like that. It's just do something else for a little bit, come back, and it's ready for you. So getting the materials necessary for crafting, once you found it initially, it's easy to get that again. And so it's not annoying to be like, oh crap, I got to go back across the whole map to find this one random weird thing. The stuff gets there quickly and easily. And that's what makes the crafting enjoyable for me. Also, you're kind of doing everything in the same little module. Drop it in a bubble, turn the crank, bam, the item's out for you. And sometimes it'll give you 3 or 4 of those items, which makes it easier to do something like crafting a fence. You can get a lot of it done at once.
Cool. Nice.
All right, on to the third charge of information underload. Now, while many people enjoy an explicit story when they play a game, something just telling you everything that's happening, that can be fine, but Garden of the Sea allows you to fill in the gaps of whatever story may be occurring. Like I said, you appear on an island, you don't really know what's going on, and nobody's talking to you and explaining to you what's going on. And actually, it wasn't until the end of the game that I realized what I was actually doing in the game, what role I played in the entire process of the quote-unquote plot in the game. And I actually kind of enjoyed that. It added some mystery to everything that I was doing. The music rolled in and it was kind of ominous at times. It was kind of mysterious and adventurous at times. And those things made me motivated to figure out what was happening. I want to find out more about what's going on rather than being told, hey, you need to do blah, blah, blah so that blah, blah, blah can happen and the game is done. Beyond that, the lack of the over-explanations makes any individual discoveries more compelling and more enticing. So they're not telling you anything. So when I go to this, a new island in the map, and I discover a new gameplay mechanic or some new puzzle that I have to solve, it's rewarding. When I solve that puzzle, I feel proud of the accomplishment. I feel excited to figure out what happens when I solve that puzzle, and that excitement motivated me to keep going, keep doing more on the islands. And it turns out what initially just seemed like an island farm sim kind of slipped into like a pseudo puzzle game, and then combining that with like the reactionary soundtrack, so there is a cool thing happening that everything you're doing in the game kind of changes the soundtrack slightly. It changes, adds notes and stuff depending on what you're doing at that specific time. Those kind of things give the game a surprising feeling of like dramatic adventure at times, which is really welcome. So for that point, I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but on the charge of information underload, I find Garden of the Sea guilty.
So one thing I always worry about with games similar to this is that I'm going to miss key information, or I'm going to miss something that would really make me enjoy the game, but because I inadvertently passed it up or didn't do that specific side quest or something, along that lines, it almost stresses me out and makes me worry that I'm not fully getting the entire experience of the game. Do you think that's possible with this, or does that worry you after playing it?
That's a really good point, Adam, because that's a fine line that somebody has to ride, right? Because you want to reveal enough information to make you interested, to want to explore that, but you don't want to drop so much information, so many hints and clues that you feel inundated and daunted and stressed out. It's like, how am I going to remember this crap? This game does it. I mean, part of it comes along with the idea that it's not a very deep game, right? There's not a lot going on, so usually when there's a hint or a clue dropped, it's not hard for me to keep that in my memory bank. However, you have a boat that you're traveling around. The boat has a storage thing, so if I ever wanted to remember something, I could take a picture of the thing I'm trying to remember. You have a camera. Put that picture in the storage box. That way I can pull it out again and say, oh, that was that thing I was looking at. Or I could just grab, the special item, the item that seems special, put it on my boat, and it's going to be there with me wherever I go. There was one instance where I, started down the path of solving a puzzle, decided to go do something else, and then I totally forgot that key item that I needed, that it was important to solve this puzzle, and I was left running around for a while. But eventually I came back around to it and figured out what was happening. But that's kind of just a byproduct of when I stopped playing the game and picked it up again the next day. But I think this game does a really good job of giving you enough to keep you interested, wanting to do something next, but not so much to where you feel like, oh, there's like this huge laundry list of things I got to keep track of now. Everything seems kind of interesting to explore and interesting to find out about.
Nice.
All right. Well, that brings us to the final verdict. Garden of the Sea is a game that I kind of thought I knew what it was before I started. I thought it was going to be like a light version of Animal Crossing, but it turns out that the game is, a little bit of Animal Crossing, but also it was like a little bit of Outer Wilds, where you have this mysterious adventure going on, and a little bit of Wind Waker, where you're hopping on this boat and traveling on the high seas, and there's an adventure taking place there. And then they throw in some farming game, they throw in some adventure stuff, and all of that stuff kind of came together to create something that was more than the sum of its parts. None of these individual components were broken. None of these individual components were annoying. They were all enjoyable, and I looked forward to engaging with all of those. So, when it comes to the final verdict of Garden of the Sea, if it's a game worth you buying, worth you playing, worth you experiencing, I have to say, I find you, Garden of the Sea, guilty.